The research station hummed quietly in the night, its lights casting a soft glow across the alien landscape. Tobias Morrison sat at his desk, examining samples of luminescent moss he'd collected that morning. The planet of Visara had proven to be a botanist's paradise, filled with flora that defied everything he thought he knew about plant biology. He stretched, his joints cracking after hours of hunching over his microscope. The loneliness of solo research sometimes got to him, but the work was too important. These plants could hold secrets to medicines, sustainable food sources, even solutions to Earth's environmental problems. A sound outside made him pause. It was faint, almost like a whimper carried on the wind. Tobias frowned, setting down his tools. The indigenous people rarely came this far into the wilderness, and the wildlife here was mostly harmless. He grabbed his jacket and stepped out into the cool night air dot the twin moons of Avon. Visara painted everything in shades of silver and blue. He walked slowly, following the sound. His boots crunched on the crystalline grass that grew in patches across the rocky terrain. Then he saw her. A figure lay crumpled near a cluster of bioluminescent fungi, barely visible in the darkness. Tobias's heart jumped into his throat as he rushed forward. It was a Vesaran woman, young, with the distinctive lavender-tinted skin of her people. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her body painfully thin. "Hey," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "Can you hear me?" No response. Her breathing was shallow, her lips tinged blue from the cold. Without hesitation, Tobias scooped her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, as if she hadn't eaten properly in weeks. He carried her quickly back to the station, his mind racing with questions. Inside, he laid her on his spare cot and immediately began checking her vitals. Her pulse was weak but steady. He wrapped her in thermal blankets and set up a warming unit nearby. As he worked, he noticed something that made his chest tighten with sympathy. Her eyes, though open and staring, didn't track his movements. They were a pale, cloudy gray. She was blind. Tobias prepared a nutrient solution, something gentle enough for a starved body. He carefully lifted her head and helped the liquid trickle between her lips. She stirred slightly, swallowing reflexively. Good. That was good. For the next hour, he monitored her closely, adjusting the temperature, checking her breathing, making sure she was stable. Questions burned in his mind. How had she ended up alone in the wilderness? Where was her family? The Vesarans he'd met in the nearby settlements were generally communal people who took care of their own as dawn broke. Painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the woman finally stirred. Her hand moved slightly, fingers clutching at the blanket. Tobias, who had dozed off in his chair, immediately jerked awake. "Easy," he said gently, moving closer. "You're safe. You're in my research station." Her head turned toward his voice, those clouded eyes trying to focus on nothing. Her lips moved, forming words in the melodic Vesaran language. Tobias's translator implant kicked in, converting her words to something he could understand. "Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "About 15 kilometers from the nearest settlement," Tobias replied. "I'm Tobias. I'm a human, a botanist. I found you outside last night. You were in bad shape." She tensed, her fingers tightening on the blanket. "Human?" "Yes, but I promise, I'm not going to hurt you. You needed help." She lay still for a long moment, processing this information. "Why would you help me?" The question caught him off guard. "Because you needed it. Why wouldn't I?" A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "My own people wouldn't." Tobias felt his jaw tighten. "What happened to you?" She turned her face away, toward the wall she couldn't see. "It doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me." He pulled his chair closer, sitting down. "At least tell me your name." Another long silence. Then barely audible, "Mara." Myra, he repeated, letting the name settle between them. That's beautiful. Are you hungry? I can make something gentle for your stomach. She nodded slowly, and Tobias saw a single tear track down her cheek. He pretended not to notice as he stood and moved to his small kitchen area. He prepared a simple broth with some local grains he'd found to be nutritious and easy to digest. When he returned, Mira had pushed herself into a sitting position, though the effort clearly exhausted her. Tobias helped her hold the bowl, guiding her hands to the warm ceramic. It's broth, he explained. Not too hot. Take small sips. She did, and with each sip, he saw some color return to her face. She drank slowly, as if afraid the food would be taken away. When she finished, she set the bowl down carefully, her hands trembling. Thank you, she whispered. You're welcome. Tobias took the bowl back. Myra, can you tell me how you ended up out there? Do you have family I should contact? Her expression hardened as she shook her head violently. No family. Please don't look for them. The fear in her voice was unmistakable. Tobias held up his hands, even though she couldn't see the gesture. Okay, I won't. But you're safe here. You can stay as long as you need to recover. Why? The question came out, almost accusatory. You don't know me. I'm broken. Useless. Why waste your resources? Tobias felt anger rise in his chest, not at her, but at whoever had made her believe such things about herself. He knelt down so he was at her eye level, even though she couldn't see him. You're not broken, Myra. You're hurt, and you've been treated badly, but that doesn't make you broken or useless. You're a person who deserves care and kindness, just like anyone else. She turned her face toward his voice, her expression unreadable. You speak like you believe that, because I do. Mira's hand moved, searching, until it found his arm. Her fingers were cold and thin, but her grip was surprisingly firm. I don't understand humans, she said softly. Tobias smiled. That's okay. We're not so complicated once you get to know us. She didn't respond, but she didn't let go of his arm either. They sat like that for several minutes, the morning light filtering through the station windows, painting patterns neither of them could fully appreciate. For Tobias, it was the beginning of something he couldn't yet name. For Mira, it was the first moment of genuine human kindness she had ever experienced. Outside, the alien world continued its eternal dance, but inside the research station, something new was beginning. Something fragile and uncertain, like a seed just beginning to sprout in unexpected soil. The days passed slowly in the research station, each one blending into the next with a gentle rhythm that Mira had never experienced before. She woke each morning to the sound of Tobias moving quietly in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. The smell of toasted grains and sweet fruit would drift through the small space, and she would lie still for a moment, almost afraid that this kindness was a dream. On the third day, Tobias helped her out of bed and guided her to a chair by the window. She could feel the warmth of the sun on her face, though she couldn't see its light. The view is incredible from here, Tobias said, settling into the chair beside her. The valley stretches out for miles, covered in silver grass that moves like waves. And there are these purple flowers that only bloom in the morning. They close up when the suns get too hot. Myra tilted her head, listening to the warmth in his voice. You love it here. I do, he admitted, though it gets lonely sometimes. I've been on the Sara for 6 months now, documenting plant species. Most of them don't exist anywhere else in the galaxy. Why do you do it? She asked. Study plants in lonely places? Tobias was quiet for a moment, considering. Because plants are honest. They don't lie or manipulate. They grow toward light, adapt to their environment, and they help each other survive through root networks we can't see. There's something pure about that. Myra felt her throat tighten. I wish people were like that. Some are, he said gently. You just haven't met enough of them yet. She wanted to believe him, but years of rejection had built walls around her heart. Her family, the wealthy Castellan clan, had hidden her away since childhood. Her blindness was seen as a genetic flaw, a stain on their prestigious lineage. Her mother had barely looked at her. Her father had pretended she didn't exist. And her brother Dorian, the perfect heir, had been taught to feel ashamed of her. Tell me about Earth, she said, changing the subject. What's it like? Tobias smiled, and she could hear it in his voice. It's beautiful and complicated. We have oceans so vast you can sail for days and never see land. Mountains that touch the clouds. Cities that glow at night like stars fallen to the ground. And gardens, Mira. Gardens with thousands of different plants, each one unique. Gardens, she repeated softly. I would like to experience one. Then I'll make you one, Tobias said without hesitation. She laughed, thinking he was joking. You can't just make a garden. Watch me. Over the next week, Tobias worked with a determination that surprised even himself. He cleared a space behind the research station and began transplanting specimens he'd collected. But this wasn't just any garden. He chose plants specifically for their textures, scents, and sounds. There were soft, fuzzy leaves that felt like velvet, flowers that released sweet perfume when touched, grasses that chimed melodically in the wind. He created winding paths of different materials, smooth stones, rough bark, soft moss, so Myra could feel where she was going. Myra listened to him work each day, heard the scrape of his shovel, his occasional curses when something didn't go right, his satisfied sighs when it did. She wanted to help, but she was still weak, still learning to trust that this place was real. One afternoon, Tobias came inside, dirt on his clothes and excitement in his voice. It's ready. Will you let me show you? Myra's heart raced with nervousness, but she nodded. He took her hand gently, his palm warm and calloused against hers, and led her outside. The air was different here, filled with competing scents that made her head spin. Okay, Tobias said, placing her hand on a wooden rail he'd built. This will guide you. Follow it and take your time. I'm right here if you need me. Myra's fingers trembled as they gripped the rail. She took one step, then another. The ground beneath her feet changed from hard-packed dirt to soft moss. She gasped at the sensation. That's moon moss, Tobias explained. It only grows in shaded areas. Keep going. She followed the rail, and it led her to a plant with broad leaves. She reached out hesitantly and touched one. It was impossibly soft, like silk. Starweave plant, Tobias said. They're rare. I found this one in a cave system. Myra stroked the leaf, marveling at its texture. She moved forward, and the rail brought her to something else. These leaves were different, covered in tiny bumps that tickled her fingers. Bubble fern, Tobias laughed. Those bumps pop when you press them. Try it. She did, and tiny bursts of sweet scent exploded around her hand. She laughed, a sound that felt foreign in her throat. When had she last laughed? The path continued, leading her through a world of sensations. Rough bark that smelled like spices. Flowers with petals that felt like paper. Vines that released a cooling sensation when touched. And everywhere, sounds, leaves rustling, stems creaking, insects humming. At the end of the path, Tobias had placed a bench. He guided her to sit, then sat beside her. What do you think? Myra couldn't speak. Tears streamed down her face, and she didn't bother to wipe them away. No one has ever done anything like this for me, she finally managed. Why? Why would you spend so much time? Tobias turned toward her, his voice serious. Because you deserve to experience beauty, Mira. Your eyes don't work, but you have hands and a nose and ears. The world has so much to offer you, if someone just takes the time to share it. She reached out, her hand finding his face. Her fingers traced his features, the strong jaw, the slight bump on his nose that suggested it had been broken once, the smile lines around his eyes. "I wish I could see you," she whispered. "You are seeing me," he said softly. Maybe better than most people who have working eyes. That night, Myra woke screaming. Tobias rushed from his room to find her tangled in her blankets, sobbing uncontrollably. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Myra, it's Tobias." "You're safe." "It was just a dream." "The room," she gasped. "The locked room. I was back there. I couldn't get out. I couldn't breathe." He sat on the edge of her bed, his hand hovering near hers, but not touching. "Tell me about it." Sometimes talking helps. Between sobs, the story came out. How her family had locked her away after her 10th birthday, claiming she was an embarrassment. How they fed her just enough to keep her alive. How her mother had told her she should be grateful for even that much consideration. "They said I was cursed," Mira whispered, "that I brought shame to the Castellan name. My brother would visit sometimes, but only to remind me how disappointed everyone was." Tobias felt rage burn through him, hot and fierce. "They're wrong, Mira. They're the ones who should be ashamed, not you." "But I am broken," she insisted. "I can't see. I can't work. I can't do anything useful." "That's not true." Tobias finally took her hand, squeezing gently. "Today in the garden, you identified 7 different plants by touch alone. You told me which direction the wind was coming from by sound. You noticed when the temperature dropped before I did. You're not broken. You've just learned to use your other senses in ways most people never develop." Myra gripped his hand like a lifeline. "You really believe that?" "I know it." She pulled his hand to her cheek, holding it there. "I'm scared, Tobias. I'm scared that this is temporary, that I'll wake up and be back in that room, or that you'll realize I'm too much trouble and send me away." Tobias shifted closer, his other hand coming up to cup her face. "I'm not sending you anywhere. You're not trouble. And this is real, Myra. I promise you, this is real." She leaned into his touch, and something shifted between them. The air felt charged, heavy with unspoken feelings. Tobias's thumb gently wiped away her tears, and Myra's breath caught. "Tobias," she whispered. "Yes?" I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, fragile and terrifying. Tobias's heart pounded so hard he was sure she could hear it. He'd been fighting these feelings for days, telling himself it was too soon, that she needed time to heal, that he shouldn't take advantage of her vulnerability. But here in the darkness, with her face turned up toward his, those arguments seemed hollow. "Myra," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I've been falling for you since the moment I found you, but I don't want to rush you. You've been through so much." "I know what I feel," she said firmly. "For the first time in my life, I feel seen. Not pitied, not hidden, but truly seen. You look at me and see a person, not a burden." Tobias leaned his forehead against hers, his eyes closing. "You're the bravest person I've ever met." "I'm scared all the time," she admitted. "That's what makes you brave. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's feeling fear and choosing to move forward anyway." Myra's hands came up to frame his face, mirroring his gesture. "Kiss me," she whispered. "Please." Tobias didn't need to be asked twice. He closed the distance between them, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. Mira made a small sound of surprise and pleasure, her fingers threading through his hair. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Tobias rested his forehead against hers again. "Stay with me," he murmured. "Not as someone I rescued, but as someone I choose. Someone who chooses me back. Yes, Myra breathed. Yes, I choose you. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, finding comfort in the steady rhythm of each other's breathing. Outside, the twin moons continued their path across the sky, and the garden Tobias had built rustled in the night breeze, alive with possibilities. For Myra, the darkness was still there. It would always be there. But now it felt different, less like a prison and more like a canvas waiting to be filled with new experiences. She had spent so long surviving that she'd forgotten what it meant to live, but Tobias was teaching her. One gentle touch, one kind word, one garden at a time. As she drifted back to sleep, safe in his arms, Myra allowed herself something she'd never dared before. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, her story didn't have to end in darkness. Hope that love could be real, even for someone like her. Hope that tomorrow would bring not just survival, but joy. And in the quiet research station, surrounded by the sleeping gardens and the gentle hum of equipment, two hearts beat in synchrony, finding in each other what they'd both been searching for: home.